Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy our narrated stories. Daddy, Daddy. This one. It's 7 in the morning, and David is jumping and smiling for his father Grayson to set up the old game system. He chose a game earlier and was promised that he could play it today. Unfortunately, Grayson had to wake up so early on his free day to play with his son. In fact, David's mother was down the hall in her room still sleeping. Grayson, even though he was half asleep, had gone to the attic and brought his old game system and video games down for his son. David was around 10 years old, so it surprised him that he wanted to play a game that was older than even Grayson himself, but nonetheless promised David that they could play together. He was smiling just like his son was. It reminded him of his own father showing him the games. Before he disappeared, Grayson shakes his head. Not today, he thought. He only wants to have quality time with his son. That's what matters. Hurry, Daddy. David playfully punched his father. Grayson apologized for dozing off and yawned as he finished setting up the entire game console. It wasn't so hard to set up. It was about a foot long and a couple inches high. The console, which was called a Superplay system, was made by a company that had a history of advanced gaming technology. They had elaborate sound effects, a decent frame rate, and the visuals were amazing for its era. It only came with one controller, which was a simple trapezoid shape and a small joystick with 4 buttons. It also had a large port on top of it to hold game cartridges. It only used 2 colors as well, purple and black. David snatched the controller out of Grayson's hand and giggled in anticipation for the TV to turn on. He put the game in the port and the company logo shining on the screen. It was in the purple forest, right, David? Yes. The monster looks so cool. He smiled wide. Monster. From what Grayson remembered, this game never had a monster in it. He was going to question about it, but then the game started up and the main menu and its music started. The title sat right in the center. Its words were gleaming yellow as the borders around it were green with vines and purple with mushroom. The screen pulsed to the beat of the adventurous music, and a man was swinging back and forth on a vine. Grayson thought it was cute that the character chanted, "Let's start," every few seconds. It was as if it was excited to play after so long. Grayson sat by his son and started to explain the controls. He clicked start for him and pointed to the controls on what to do. The joystick was to move, which prompted the character to jump off the vine and begin level 1. The right button was to jump and the bottom was to punch, which prompted the character to jump to a cage and break it, freeing the animals trapped inside. The other buttons grabbed and pulled things. David learned very fast. He jumped up to tall trees and freed animals. He jerked while he played, almost acting out the commands his character was doing. He yelped when he freed animals or escaped the claws of a tiger. Grayson cheered him on and smiled with him. They played and laughed together in the game for another hour. They started in the forest, which was full of green and predators waiting to pounce on them. Grayson had to help David a lot, but always left David to finish levels himself. Then the next zone was a city zone. Grayson groaned at this level. He always hated cities. Too big, dangerous, and full of rats. The character seemed to like it, though. It was running across building rooftops, escaping the police. The city was unnaturally dark, and the blue and red lights from the police was the only way they could see in front of them. A siren played the whole time, which they couldn't hear over the sound of their own voices. "David, watch out. There's a rat under there." David squealed and jumped erratically, which brought the police closer. "No," they both screamed in desperation. As they escaped the frightening zone, they turned down the volume to check if David's mother, Maria, was still awake. Snoring came from down the hall, and the two chuckled as they returned back to the game. After the frightening city zone, they reached a sea zone. They had to balance as they dodged hungry fish. Some were small and helped heal them, while others were much larger and could eat the character in one fell swoop. They even encountered a whale-like fish. It was amazing how advanced this system actually was. You could see the pixels clearly, but its artist detail was beyond its years. But then something went wrong. They reached the trademark zone of the game, the purple forest. There was a great color change from the previous zones: blues, greens, and reds. Trees were full of cayenne leaves. The ground was laced with purple mushrooms, and bright yellow fireflies flew everywhere, lighting up the forest. Even now, the forest looked great to Grayson, and David smiled ear to ear in wonder. Their eyes were wide. Grayson looked at his son and patted his back. Then, as they explored the forest, weird signs started to appear. Not lit up by yellow fireflies, but green ones. The first sign was large, but difficult to read through the pixels. But they both knew what it said. "Welcome back" was what was written on it. David was confused, but shrugged it off as a cool boss battle. Maybe it was even a friendly person. Grayson didn't assume that. He knew that this sign wasn't a part of the game. There wasn't any dialogue besides the cute intro. He had no idea how there was a sign, and, more importantly, how there was a message on it. Another one appeared. "You thought I wouldn't find you, old friend." David scratched his head but kept running forward, not noticing that fireflies were starting to disappear. Grayson began to worry. He scratched his own messy brown hair and pulled out his phone. The internet should know, right? It was unlikely this was some rare event, because this game was too old for that. But that was his best guess. David still went forward. The character didn't stop, but he questioned where all the animals went. Grayson typed in the browser the purple forest special signs and hoped something accurate came up. This game was about 30 years old, so it couldn't be too hard to find. It was also really famous and known for being a retro game that people still remember. Maybe Grayson thought he had a bootleg copy. That would suck. He had all this fun and now had to tell David that they were playing a possibly pirated version of his favorite game. But when he pressed the search button, the only thing that came up was a white screen with a blue underlined message in the top left corner. "Where is your child?" Grayson shot his head up from his phone. David was gone. Grayson jumped up and looked around the room. All the toys and clothes were in David's closet unmoved, and the door to his bedroom wasn't opened. The bed and in the closet anyway. Nothing. The window wasn't open. The game wasn't even turned off. It had a bright red error screen and a low humming noise. Where had David gone? Grayson called out for him. No one came. He was going to leave the room before an awful screech came from the TV. It felt like nails were clawing at his brain. He covered his ears and had to support himself by leaning on the wall. The sound didn't stop. He tried to turn around and kneel down to turn off the console, but his hand slipped. His whole hand landed on the console, missing the off button, and his hand sizzled. It was an awful noise, and Grayson screamed. He snatched his hand away and fell to the floor, groaning. He looked at the console. It was spiting dark red liquid that smoked. He started to reach for his phone again, which was on the floor beside him, and tried to dial 911. He almost pressed the call button, but then a message appeared on the screen. The red error messages were gone, and instead there were two crescent-shaped eyes staring at him. White, bold lettering was underneath it. "Face me, you coward!" The eyes stalked him as the letters faded away. And what faded in was two large, white, cartoon-looking gloves holding a small child. The child looked asleep and calm. "David," Grayson grabbed the controller. He thought he never needed to do this ever again. He thought he escaped that thing. You cannot run from the past. You cannot run from me. Grayson gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and closed his eyes. He counted to 10 and opened them again. He was in a different world. He was in a dark, foggy city. The moon pierced through the clouds. It was a bright, full moon. There were large buildings with broken fire escapes, broken windows, and smoking chimneys. They turned and leaned unnaturally inwards towards him and the main road he was on. They dripped with rainwater and blood which splashed on the ground and streamed down the drain. The road was cracked and missing pieces. The fog was thick and you couldn't see more than 30 feet. The air was dense and smelled like rot. It was cold and it nipped in Grayson's neck. And right by the road, the sidewalk was broken with dark weeds growing outward with jagged edges. The weeds created a sort of path into a nearby alleyway. The builds there looked like they were melting, dispute the bitter cold, and from the darkness he could hear rabid breathing. "It's there." As if on cue, a large creature emerged from the darkness. Vile, wet stomping echoed across the city. Such a disgusting thing, Grayson thought. He could make most of it out. It was a contorted version of a rat. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall, but it was almost cartoon-like. It took obvious traits of a rat, such as the nose, long pink tail, large oval ears, and dirty, hairy body. Everything else was wrong. Its mouth was long and jaw stretched way too far into a haunting grin full of human teeth. Its yellow crescent eyes pierced into Grayson in its empty eye sockets. It had shriveled up skin and hair wrapped around its skinny arms and long legs. The arms ended in large white gloves, and it had black shoes that made it look like a cartoon character. Its tail was even curling and whipping around like a hungry snake. And its most iconic part was its white hair with stripes covering its whole body. It made Grayson shiver and hug himself like he was back to being a child. He released himself fast, angry that he would demote to such antics. But he couldn't help but shake a bit every time the thing stepped. His old friend, Miss Stripes. The disgusting thing spoke. Its mouth didn't move, which made Grayson really think it was a mascot suit. A dark creature hidden within. Blood splattered out of his mouth as he talked. "It has been such a long time. I never thought you would create Spawn." Grayson always hated the way it talked. It made him shiver and bother his throat. Its vile voice seemed to come from a dark abyss of its soul, and it reverberated outwards like wet gurgling. "I thought we stopped playing this game." I thought I could move on." The beast stopped walking and stood up. It really was a massive thing. It towered over Grayson. He guessed it easily was 10 feet tall. "But I never left. And now we have to play again. For old time's sake." Grayson looked down and saw his reflection in the dark puddle below him. The eyes of the beats were spotlights, like they would never let him go. Why does David have to be involved? "Just leave him out of this." Grayson yelled. "It's simple. I need someone to play with." Grayson twitched. "What do you mean?" The beast crooked his head, and Grayson followed its gaze behind him. There David was. He was on a bed sleeping out in this fog. He was turning and twisting in bed. He cried and yelled for his father. Grayson tried to run to him, but then the beast jumped in the way. They both looked face to face, its jaw wide and frothing with blood and pus. Its eyes were bright and unwavering. Its smile was wide and chilling. "This is our game. If you wake him up from this nightmare, he will leave it. But if you leave him alone and you sleep, I will let you go." Grayson froze. He couldn't. He couldn't possibly make that choice. He couldn't. There was no way he could ever make that choice. What would his son do without him? Maria, how would she react? He can't leave his whole world behind. But he wouldn't ever leave his son in this nightmare realm. Not even if it meant his life would come back to him. How did this decision come so fast? Was this really his last choice in life for his son? Will he ever see him again? What is this hellscape of games and torture be like? "Choose." Grayson went to his son. The beast moved out the way and let him. He took off the blanket covering him and held him tight. David stopped crying and hugged his father back. He wasn't awake, but his body knew it was safe in the hands of his father. Safe in the hands of a father who loved him. Grayson cried and put his son back on the bed. He kissed him on his forehead and held his face. He thought his son was beautiful, a little boy destined to do great things. He would do anything for his son, anything to make him happy. So as Grayson shakes his son awake, he tears up. He knows he might never see him again. Never see him grow old, never see him find love, never see him be great. Never see his son be his son. Then David was gone. The bed was empty. Grayson sobbed into the bedsheets. Now at the mercy of this monster. The beast savagely ripped Grayson from the bed and brought him to its face. Grayson's eyes opened wide. In its hands he was its plaything. He was its puppet to entertain it however it wanted, to play twisted games of savage, demented fun. Just like old times. Let's play for eternity. The end. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe our channel for more stories.